Hi everybody. Today's topic is defenses. In one sense, you could say that the whole Course in Miracles is a very poetic way of getting us in touch with our defenses. On one side, Jesus talks about those defenses, the ego thought system. That's one aspect. The other aspect is that he describes or attempts to describe in a very beautiful language what we are defending against. And it really starts in the introduction, because if you read it, the two lines we have discussed those before. The aim of the Course is not to teach the meaning of love. The Course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is our natural inheritance. The blocks to the awareness of love's presence are defenses. It's not that there's us, there's love, and then there's this block in the middle. That it's this block that we put up those defenses for a purpose. And the whole Course is about purpose in one way or another. The lesson in the workbook that describes defenses the most, or very specifically, is lesson 136. Sickness is a defense against the truth. Now, that is just an example. Because you could read this and say, well, if you're sick, that's just a defense against the truth. But everything else is not a defense against the truth. So that singles out sickness as something especially bad, right, or unspiritual. Everything is a defense against the truth. And I want to make the connection again to lesson number 5 in the workbook, because lesson number 5 says, I'm never upset for the reason I think. And there's one segment that I did that talks about that, and you can substitute I'm upset for anything else. For example, I'm never angry, afraid, dismissive, frantic, worthless, feeling stupid, attached, detached, dependent, etc., etc. Sick, frightened, anxious, for the reason I think, right? The same is with lesson 136. You could substitute anything else for sickness throughout, and then read the lesson with this in mind, because it is identical. Anger is defense against the truth. Judgment, fear, attack, depression, weakness, loneliness, abandonment. Any terms that we can insert into the lesson number 5. I'm never upset or angry or depressed, for example, for the reason I think. Lesson 136 makes it clear that sickness and the whole ego thought system is a defense against the truth. It's not sinful, and that's a really important point. Jesus is not saying, hey, you're defending against the truth, that's a bad thing. Because for him, you have to realize that the defenses that we're putting in place on a daily basis, on a minutia, every second of the day, the defenses we're putting up are there for a reason. And that reason is that we're afraid of love. And we can only be afraid of love of something that we know. I used the example of the ocean in the last segment about the state of heaven. That if we imagine the state of heaven being as the ocean with nothing else outside and nothing else within, and we are one part within this ocean that is unified with the whole ocean. And when we separated, when we seemingly separated, we became a single drop of the ocean, now outside of the ocean, seemingly outside of the ocean, having forgotten that the ocean even exists, but longing for it at the same time. With this fervent, painful longing that we have for this ocean, for our wholeness, ourself. We find ourselves in the desert, in this world, a single ocean, a single drop of water, not remembering how we got here. And we have placed a distance between us and the ocean. We have placed mountain ranges and deserts and endless forests and ice caps and rivers and swamps, all symbolic for our mind, for the ego thought system, in between us and the awareness that we are still in the ocean. Those defenses are very real for us, but for Jesus, they're not real at all, because they reinforce our longing for home. The defenses prove that we want to go home. There's a section in the course that I'm going to do a separate segment on it that explains the fear as a call for love, and I'm going to explain it, or I'm going to go through that in a little bit more detail a little later on. But for now, it's just important that defenses are not sinful. Defenses are in place because we are so afraid of love, so afraid of who we are in truth. We are afraid of ourselves. And I'm just going to go through that lesson a little bit to explain something, to explain the defenses a little bit in more context. But the mind is also a defense. So, for example, there's love, right? And then there is the next thing after love, after this oneness, this completeness, this eternity, God, the truth, came the tiny mad idea in which we believed that we separated. So we believe now that we have committed a sin, and the sin, the individuality, is the first defense against the truth, right? We're identified with individuality to protect us from truth, to defend us against truth. That's not enough. Then we need to add a layer, which is sin. The ego tells us we're sinful, so we're adding sin, the belief in sin, as a defense against love, because as long as we think we sinned against oneness, we will never return, because we are so afraid of what's going to happen, right? So we have individuality, we have sin. From sin stems guilt. Guilt is a defense against the truth. It's another layer. As long as we feel guilty, this overwhelming pain of guilt and shame over what we did when we killed God, seemingly, is a layer over our belief in sin, which is a layer over our attachment to individuality. So each of those defenses are perfectly intertwined with each other, making it a foolproof system that the ego has promised us we can never go back to God. We project the guilt outward to get rid of it. The projection of our guilt creates another layer of defense, because if we see the guilt outside, we don't see it inside, which means we can't look at it inside, which means we can't go through it to the sin, can't go through it to individuality, and from there to love. So individuality, sin, guilt, projection of the guilt outward, and the next layer is fear. The fear is the next layer, because we're now afraid of the attack of somebody else. Somebody's gonna rob us, somebody's gonna betray us. We're afraid. We need alarm systems, and we need to protect ourselves because we're afraid of the outside world. That is another layer. We're afraid of the outside world because we projected our attack thoughts onto the outside world. That's another defense that protects the guilt, that protects the belief in sin, and that protects our belief in individuality. So what we're doing on a daily basis is nothing but defending against love. Every situation we're in, every thought we have, every emotion we have are nothing but defense. A whole big defense system against love, against the overwhelming and vast, unimaginable love that is within us. And lesson 136 just gives it a little bit more specificity, you know what I mean? Specificity. It says here, sickness is not an accident. Like all defenses, it is an insane device for self-deception. Like all defenses. So Jesus says sickness is a defense, and all those other things that the ego brings forth are also defenses. It is an insane device for self-deception. And like all the rest, its purpose is to hide reality. Attack it, change it, render it inept, distort it, twist it, or reduce it to a little pile of unassembled parts. The aim of all defenses is to keep the truth from being whole. Defenses are not unintentional. So this is all about sickness, but we get angry, right? Anger is projection of guilt outward. We get angry and we think it's unintentional. I just got angry. It's a reaction, right? It's a reaction to something that from the outside world. I get angry. I can't do anything about it. But Jesus says defenses are not unintentional, nor are they made without awareness. So we are fully aware when we put the defenses in place. If I feel abandoned, if I feel angry, if I feel weak, anything that is the array of the ego thought system, I'm fully aware that I'm placing this defense between me and the truth. And then, defenses are not unintentional, nor are they made without awareness. They are secret magic wands you wave when truth appears to threaten what you would believe. They seem to be unconscious, but because of the rapidity with which you choose to use them, in that second, even less, in which the choice is made, you recognize exactly what you would attempt to do and then proceed to think that it is done. So we know what we're doing. We know we know this moment right before we get angry, right before we project our guilt, right before we get sleepy, right before we get weak, right before we get sick. We know exactly what we're doing. When we feel abandoned or betrayed or jealous, we know exactly what we're doing. They seem to be unconscious. Yeah, okay, I got that already. Who but yourself evaluates a threat, decides escape is necessary, and sets up a series of defenses to reduce the threat that has been judged as real. The threat we judge as real is love. We think love is a real threat. The ego has convinced us that love is a threat. All this cannot be done unconsciously, but afterwards your plan requires that you must forget you made it. So it seems to be external to your own intent, a happening beyond your state of mind, an outcome with a real effect on you instead of one affected by yourself. So the moment we decide to experience anything except peace, we are fully aware of what we're doing, but then we drop a veil. The ego and us together drop a veil between us and what we did. And now we think the outside world did this to us. So not only do we defend against the truth with projecting the guilt outward and getting angry, we're then, as a second defense, forget that we did it. And the whole course is nothing but laying bare the ego thought system, and Jesus telling us, look at your defenses. They're not a sin. You're just afraid. That's all. If you look at those defenses with me, they will disappear, because their purpose is to keep us from love. And if we realize that we don't have to be afraid of love, those defenses, everything in our life will change, completely change. How we perceive people will change. We will not get defensive. That's just one of the defenses. We will not feel all those things that we feel throughout the day in various degrees, jumping back and forth between different emotions and thoughts. All thoughts we think are nothing else but defenses against love. But we have to go through the layers of defenses to get back to it. We can't just jump from being angry to, oh no, I can choose love. Yes, theoretically we could, but we have built those defenses: individuality, sin, guilt, projection, fear. We have built those to be almost impenetrable, and the Course says defenses are foolproof; they're not God-proof. So we have to look at those defenses, at each and every one of those, with Jesus next to us, holding his hand and starting to smile at them, but we have to look at them first. Sickness is a decision. Anger is a decision. Feeling abandoned is a decision. Feeling weak is a decision. All those terms that we have in lesson number 5 that we substituted for upset. Being bored is a decision. Being impatient is a decision. Feeling helpless is a decision. Feeling lazy is a decision. Being in pain is a decision. Being addicted is a decision. It is not a thing that happens to you quite unsought, which makes you weak and brings you suffering. It is a choice you make. A plan you lay when for an instant truth arises in your own deluded mind, and all your world appears to totter and prepare to fall. Now you are sick, now you are angry, now you feel abandoned. That truth may go away and threaten your establishments no more. So if you read the Course with this in mind, that the introduction says the aim of the Course is to remove the blocks, right? And those blocks are defenses against the truth. And if you read the Course with this in mind, it will become much clearer what Jesus is talking about, because he describes always the ego thought system, which is the defense, and then he describes the correction, which is the remembrance of the truth and the remembrance of what we defend against. I think that's all I have for today, and I will see you soon. Thanks for watching.